Hey, security pros! Vince Lombardi says winning isn't everything, but wanting to win is. You are listening to Security Pro Insights because you want to win. Your road to success starts now. Our special guest today is Jeremy Rowe. Jeremy is currently the VP of Security at Dickinson Financial Corporation. He has come up through the ranks the hard way, through learning, working hard, and proving his worth. Jeremy served in various roles, such as an investigator, he's been a supervisor, and he is now leading a large financial institution. Jeremy, thank you for being our guest today. Could you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. I have a family of 5 total, my wife and 3 kids, all of them under the age of 12, who have all kind of grown up in this field as well. So they're getting to learn from me firsthand. I started with a much larger firm right out of college and went through with them about 8 years before moving over to the current firm here. And it went from basically a $25 billion firm down to a $4 billion firm. So it seemed to be a step in the wrong direction, but it was an opportunity for me to build my own team, set my own foundation and groundwork over here, and really grow something from the ground up, which was a good opportunity. That's basically what you need to know about me. Is I went directly from college to career to here I am today.
Well, I know that you have a couple degrees from Missouri State University. And did you ever see yourself where you're at today while you were initially going through school?
It's a good question. Absolutely not. So I went down to Southwest Missouri State at the time that I was there for my undergrad. And I was in a completely different part of campus than where the public affairs and sociology group is now. And I found myself taking a criminal justice course, took a liking to one of the professors, and he offered me a position working loss prevention at a local Macy's, and kind of opened the door for me there. And I worked for Macy's for quite some time. I was May Company when I was with them before they sold to Macy's. And eventually got into the banking side, internal and external fraud, which kind of led me here. I went back to Missouri State. At that time, it was Missouri State for my master's degree in criminal justice and social administration, and the rest has been, the follow up, the certifications and everything like that related to the field has all been a part of growing and advancing.
Your resume speaks for itself when it comes to a guy who has grown from really, let's call it accidentally getting into the industry, to leading the security team of a good-sized organization. For others who are trying to follow behind you, do you have any insight, any best practices that you could recommend of what to do, what to focus on in order to maybe follow a similar path?
Sure. I guess what's important for those who are either new to the field, they're probably going to be as surprised that I was when I went through college, or and started talking through May Company, and then working for that for the other firm. It was just one of those things where I didn't even know this job existed. I understood that there was people that worked investigations if your credit card was stolen or if your bank account was compromised, but I didn't know to what end those investigations were handled and by what team. And getting involved in when you hear that term security or bank security, you're immediately you start pulling images of the bellied security officer in a uniform with a billy club standing in some lobby, and that's just couldn't be further from the truth, although I'm pretty sure I have some family members that probably believe that that's the job. Either way, I would just say for those just getting into this or have been in it a few years is to be patient and know that there's always going to be ups and downs, ebbs and flows when it comes to investigations and setting up your program, and know that change takes time. You're going to want to go into a new environment and you're going to say, okay, well, we did it over here this way. I want to implement these changes and I want them done now. And know that those changes going from one organization to the next, doesn't matter what it is, even if the jobs aren't similar, you're going to want to introduce your own ideas of how things should work based on your experiences. And know that those experiences may not connect with the folks that are currently here. So you need to understand where your department is at, where your organization is at, before you go implementing a vast number of changes. I would focus on 1 to 3 things a year. And once you accomplish those 1 to 3 things, then you move on to your next set of goals, and you really set up achievable goals, and you measure your results so that you know you're making progress. And what a lot of us do, I think, and I'm guilty of this myself, Scott, is you get into a role and you attempt to implement change, but you haven't really done the groundwork or the legwork to justify the reason for the change or the reason for your recommendation. And so I would say as someone who's new to this field, make sure you're doing the time, you're being diligent in your investigation process, in your research, so that when you put forth a change or a recommendation, it's well-founded and it's grounded in fact, it's measurable, the results are measurable, and it's going to impact the organization. And impact is certainly one of those things that can be measured differently. But for most of us in either a public organization or a private organization, know that dollars talk and money speaks. So you need to provide recommendations that will affect the company's overall bottom line. So when you're building your program, address that. Indicate that, hey, this is what we want to do, and here are the results. We hope to affect the bottom line in this way, whether it be loss prevention, asset protection, bank security, fraud, internal and external fraud, bank card, Reg E cases, things like that. Anything that you're making the recommendation on, what you're hoping to do is control loss, control shortage, control shrink, and you need to make your recommendations towards that so that you've got that buy-in from your executive managers that say, okay, here's a guy who's coming in, he's making these recommendations. He's been here X number of years. We know he understands the organization. We know he's done his research. We know he's thoughtful. And we know he understands the potential impact, be it a compliance impact, be it a logistical impact, be it an additional burden maybe you're putting on the branch staff or the endpoint user. You've got to be sensitive to all of those things, because making a change here in the corporate office sends ripples throughout the organization. You have no idea just how many things are involved in an updated policy or an updated procedure or one of your recommendations or one of your mandates that this sort of thing can't happen anymore. So before you go making those mandates, making those recommendations, just be thorough, do your research, and make sure it makes sense for the organization. And if it makes sense for the organization, it's probably going to affect dollars in one way or another. So there's going to be a return, an ROI that the company is going to be able to see.
One thing that I like to understand, many of us come through the criminal justice type background, and although we may have a business course through that time frame, we don't necessarily graduate as business people. Do you have any kind of direction, insights on how to better create a true return on investment for the organization? Because often we're looked at as just a cost center.
Correct. No, you're absolutely right. A lot of people look at us as a necessary evil and a burden, a succubus to the organization who provides little value up front or little value in return on investment. And it's one of those things that you're constantly going to be battled. If you're a cost center versus a revenue generator, you're treated differently. Your recommendations are considered differently. So it's important that when you set up your program, that everything you do, you're showing the value you provide to the organization. Now, up front, it makes sense for you to track your internal and external investigations, your losses, your recoveries related to those investigations. And then when you're allocating for things like training and site visits and those very important things like putting boots on the ground, meeting these people, meeting your staff, meeting your associates at the branch level, doing annual training, sending out alerts when there's issues arising at the branch, whether it be physical security and safety or external fraud, that you are putting a potential or prevented loss amount out there. Here we have suspect A who's negotiating bad checks at various banks in the Colorado Springs or Kansas City or St. Louis or Phoenix, Arizona area. We send out an alert, and that individual shows up, and we're able to avoid the negotiation of a $3,000 counterfeit check based on the upfront information that our team provided to that banking center. That is something that executive management wants to see. Here we have a group or an organization within our team here that has sent out an alert which immediately prevented the passing of a $3,000 counterfeit check. That is a loss that is avoided, that is 100% measurable, and it shows the value of your team, your department. And so when you're trying to make sense from a business standpoint, and like we talked about ROI and everything like that, when you show documentation, be it a spreadsheet, you should, I recommend some sort of case management software, which will allocate much of this by itself and give you reports and graphs and charts that you can show your executive management team, particularly during times when they're, allocating for budgets for the next fiscal year. You can show them, hey, look, here's the investment my team made. Here's our operating costs. But I want you to know this is the amount of cases we work. This is the total amount involved in those cases. This is the total amount recovered during that time based on our actions. And that could be prosecution. That could be setting up payment arrangements. That could be working with your collections team or your loss prevention team. It could be a number of different things that you would measure within that formula. And that's really going to show you value. So in understanding business, I had a business when I was in college. So when you kind of run your own little side business, you kind of understand, you're going to have some things on the books. It's going to look like all operating costs for a while until the revenue starts working in. So that initial investment will pay dividends later on down the road. It's the same thing for security. It's the same thing for corporate investigations. You put in the groundwork, you put in the legwork, you send out these alerts, you do these training courses, you set up these case management software programs, you work with your BSA and AML teams to set up these complex, algorithms that will detect variations in account activity. You work those cases, and you record all those things. You have that information readily available in a report of some kind that you could hand to an executive management member to say, here is what we do in providing some sort of value to the overall bottom line.
How do you document? You mentioned a case management software. How do you make that a priority amongst all the busyness?
Well, it's got to become second nature to you. And like you, I have in the past, you wait a number of weeks and you're like, okay, well, I'll get to the end of the month and I'll put everything into the case management software. Some of us have analysts. Some of us do not. Some of us may be a one-man team, as I was for quite a while. And it's just one of those things that's got to be second nature to you. As you work these cases, file them away. If you don't have a case management software, you need to make sure it's backed up on a secure drive somewhere. Or maybe it's just an email question related to an external case or internal question related to an internal case. Those all, the way that your email set up, it may auto archive. I think I've got mine set up to never delete or to never go away, and it's backed up off-site. So I file any questions, any concerns, any comments, any issues that I'm doing that may not necessarily substantiate opening up a full investigation or a full case, but those answering those questions and being available for all of those things, I throw that in an investigations folder for questions, for comments, maybe external cases, internal cases, whatever they may be. I make sure I track all of that information. So at the end of the day, I can always fall back to, okay, let's just say I'm doing an investigation on myself and I want to have a better understanding of what this guy does on a daily basis. One of the first things that I would do if I was investigating an external manager or one of my managers is I would take a look at their email correspondence. I want to look at their Outlook calendar. I want to better understand where they're spending their day, how they're spending their day. Are they tracking what they're doing? And if I see someone who's, not answering emails timely or not responding to folks with questions or managing their day on a calendar, and some of us are old school. I keep a desk calendar as well. I also have notes and a calendar on my phone, and there's some redundancy there, and some things make it to one calendar and others don't, and that's just part of the process. But you have to get used to managing all of those things. But when you're doing so, especially in a cost center environment, which we talked about earlier, when your operation costs the bank more money than maybe you can make the argument that you don't, either protect or you don't recover, whatever it may be, you have to be able to understand and record and explain your value to the organization. And having all of that documentation is going to help you make that case.
You're saying it just has to be a habit, plain and simple,
Correct.
A habit. Do you have a case management software you recommend if someone's looking for something to use for the team?
No, I don't want to recommend a specific one. There's so many good ones out there. Through mine is a part of a BSA and AML program. They have a little case management add-on that we went ahead and purchased. So there's things out there through Verifin and BAM Plus and various things like that. There's a number of different case management providers. Some people, the organization I was in previous to this one, build their own case management software if they have the infrastructure and the ability to do so internally, which is what we had over there. So we built our own so that we could monitor it and only input the information that we felt was necessary or pertinent, because you do get a lot of add-ons with a off-the-shelf software program or case management system. And there's a bunch of, fields and tables and boxes and things like that you're never going to use, you're never going to check. But if they're there, someone's going to ask why you don't use them. So it's important when you're making your selection for said software that you consider what it is you want the software to say. And that goes for anything that you present. You can present charts, you can present case trends by type, you can present, pie graphs, whatever it may be. As you're presenting these items, we need to understand and think about the message we're trying to portray. What message are we communicating? Does a chart make sense? Does a bar graph make sense? Does a timeline make sense? Does just a standard memo make sense? So in all of those things, including your selection of a case management software, you just want to make sure that you figure out what you need. And then at the end of the day, when you present those reports, what message are you trying to tell?
You have a value statement that's your guide, it's your roadmap for your team. In your environment, you have many branches, just like a retail outlet would, or quite frankly, any large organization typically has many facilities throughout their footprint. How do you effectively get that message out? Is it a training program? Is it just marketing, internal marketing messaging? How do you get the security message out so that the internal team has a little buy-in to what you're trying to accomplish?
Right. So, good question. I think that probably the most important thing that corporate investigations or a security team can do to portray their value to an organization is get their name out there and have a general understanding amongst all of the associates and employees about what your organization is about and what resources we have to utilize internally through security for that. And by doing that, you're going to get your name out there. You're going to get your value statement out there. And one of the ways we do that is we talk to every new hire that comes aboard here. So we've got roughly 1,700 employees, and I think all of them know my name or have spoke with me directly, either via the phone or in a training class, either here in or Colorado or maybe here in Kansas City, wherever it may be. I also see them at the branch level too. And so when you're allocating resources or managing a budget and we're trying to explain the importance of being on these sites, putting a face to a name or a face to a voice, it's important that you do that and that you spend the time, although none of us have enough time to visit all the branches we want or to do all those site surveys we want or to do all the training that we want. It is so important that you at least talk to your new hires. And as they take annual training courses, and I imagine some of those training courses, some of our colleagues that are listening to this have probably developed their own training courses, as have we, be it bank robbery or check fraud or money laundering, whatever it may be, whatever course you've developed, you're sending that out on an annual basis, and you make sure that people understand that security is everyone's job and that fraud is fought first on the front line. And our front line of defense is, of course, our teller staff, our personal bankers, and our retail managers. And so you empower them with the knowledge and skills necessary to do what they need to control fraud losses right there at the teller line. And that's going to be 99% of your overall fight. Now, you may spend, I do spend a significant amount of resources on internal investigations. That's all part of the process. And that can also kind of earn you a reputation too, that, hey, if you talk to this guy, you're probably going to get fired. Or if you're working with this guy and he comes in and he wants to talk to you directly, that probably is your last day. And so that kind of comes with the territory. You just kind of take those on the chin and try to change that mentality. As you hear people say that or if people think that, you say, no, it's just the opposite. I'm here to help out. I'm here to find out what happened. We're here to find actionable intelligence so that we can make this organization safer. We can make it better. And if we have an internal issue or an external fraud issue, that we address it immediately so that we don't create a toxic environment or a hostile work environment for anybody to work in. And that once again, that goes back to adding value to the organization. Sometimes that means you address employees or customers that are potentially in unsavory or not preferred situations, and that just kind of comes with the territory. But when you interact with them on the branch level, your interaction has the potential to create a ripple effect throughout the organization, particularly if the case is large enough or significant enough to bring about lasting change. I think most change in an organization like this one or in corporate America, you're left kind of reeling after a loss, and everybody's pointing fingers and everybody wants to know what happened. And when your team's charged with finding out what happened, a lot of times they may point the blame on you or want to point the blame somewhere, and it's important that you don't point the blame on anybody. Report the information as you see it. Don't be influenced by external factors or internal, parties who are looking to protect themselves. Be an objective third party. Go in there and look at the situation. Provide coaching if necessary. Provide training if necessary. But also report your findings as you see them, and Everyone will know at the end of the day, hey, this guy is a straight shooter. He didn't go in there trying to protect anybody's job. He didn't go in there looking to, bite anybody's heads off or get them kicked out of the organization, or he's not just looking to eliminate customers on potential risk. He is looking to make recommendations and to make moves that provide value to the organization. And that value can't be stated enough. But in order to provide that change and to be able to go out and talk with these people and train these people on a monthly basis, you have to be able to sell the fact that that is necessary. And you sell the fact that that is necessary based on all those things we talked about just a moment ago, which is recording everything that you're doing, the value you add to the organization from an external and internal fraud production standpoint or reduction standpoint, a loss prevention and recovery standpoint. All of those things are required and should be considered.
So, Jeremy, give me a story. All this that you're telling me, it's fantastic information. It's information that comes from somebody who's had to deal with something. So put this in a real life scenario for me. Where have you had a success, maybe a challenge and then the success? Walk me through a real life process of how this has worked for you.
Sure. I've got a case on my desk right now where we basically received information internally from a new hire or candidate. Okay, and I'm not breaking any rules by sharing this information with you. But when you go out and you have these conversations or you're doing these training programs, you walk them through policy and procedure and expectations based on what you see. Okay, and there's a number of different. We talk about what we work, our external and internal case types, some of the resources that we have to combat things like theft and embezzlement. Stealing cash or commercial private accounts, deposits, short change, forgery, document manipulation, ethics violations, lapping schemes, gaming schemes. Gaming when we talk about some of the organizations out there who may be opening up accounts without getting clear consent from customers. I know there's some organizations out there that are under a bit of trouble or scrutiny over the past year. If you're paying attention to the news, you probably know who I'm talking about. But, we discuss all of those things and the potential impact that even one teller at a teller line can do for us. So to get to the story, I always give them the opportunity to talk with me after the training class. I provide my contact information and I say, okay, as a new hire, as a new associate, we're going to send you out in the field, either as a mortgage loan originator, or maybe you're a regional sales manager, or maybe you're a personal banker at one of our retail banking centers. You're going to go out there. You now have an understanding of what our expectations are, what our internal controls are, what our resources are, and the types of things that we're looking for, right? If our focus right now is on elder abuse cases and preventing elder abuse, or stopping fraud checks at the line, or advanced fee schemes, or if it has to do with gaming the system or theft or embezzlement, whatever it may be, when we talk about this during training, we empower our folks. Once again, I go back to that word empowerment. We empower our folks with the knowledge they need to go out there and recognize potential fraud issues, be it internal or external. And just here recently, we received reports from one of our new hires who's, assigned to one of our branches. And this person called us by phone and explained what they were dealing with and what they were seeing during the account opening process, during the opening and closing process of the branches, during the discussions with our customer base, amongst a particular employee there. And so we did some due diligence, and we sat back and we conducted an investigation, and we used some of the resources we talk about, that the resources we all have, like CCTV, monitoring email, monitoring internal systems, monitoring what they're doing on the teller or integrated system. And, we were able to put together a profile based on what we learned, not just from the whistleblower per se, but also from our investigation. And it eventually led to a conversation with that employee, suspect employee, and an admission for several different things that needed to be addressed. And that is one of those things where, had we not gone out and done the training, had we not made that person who told us about this information feel comfortable enough with us to tell us that information, then we likely would never have addressed the issue, because we likely would not have known about it until you get a customer complaint, or another employee steps up to complain, or one of our internal measures catches something on the off chance that they don't cover their tracks well enough. And so I think that's an important story, an important message to say is, hey, get your information out there. But in order to do that, they have to feel like the security or corporate investigations team is approachable. And if you're a one-man or two-man operation and you guys are shutting doors instead of building bridges, it's just one of those things where they're not going to want to go to you. Or if you mishandle the investigation or mishandle provided information, information provided in confidence, should you mismanage that, or somehow they're exposed one way or another, you've created a hostile work environment, you've created a trust issue. And those are the type of things, unfortunately, very rarely do people remind us of the things that we're doing well. We remind ourselves, and they remind us of the things that we've messed up on over and over again. That's how hard we are on ourselves, and that's just human nature. So they're going to remember that they gave you information, that you botched the investigation, and they're going to explain that to other folks, and they're going to know, hey, I can't really trust them as an outlet for helping me in the future if you botched the initial investigation. So I wanted to touch on that. I think it's important that you allow yourself to be accessible to everyone, and that starts from the associate at the retail banking level all the way up to your CEO, all the way up to your board. Security or corporate investigations should be a third party that is able to evaluate a situation and provide honest and candid feedback at any level of the organization. There shouldn't be outside or inside influence on anything. And so if you're not running your team that way, or if you get into an organization and they're like, hey, okay, security is maybe they're the pinky finger and they're not pointing the direction of this company. That's just part of the deal. That's part of the process. That's the field we're in. We may always be on the back burner, but when we're utilized, it's important that we are prepared and that we are professional and that we're providing uninfluenced, unjaded, clear and concise information that is understandable for everyone.
And that's an excellent story, and really speaks highly of that new employee to really be willing to step up and feel comfortable enough to express what he or she saw. And that does speak highly of the training program that you have in place, as well as that personal connection. Leads to a final question. We are running low on time. It's one thing to train a new hire, but how do you implement a recurring training program effectively so that your employees do not forget?
It's a great question. So compliance may mandate that certain training courses go out annually to, banking managers or banking employees or different groups within the bank. Departments may have special training that is unique to them and their situation. So there may be a mandate within the organization that they have to take X number of courses related to their field a year or quarterly or semi-annually. So, some of that is true in the security field as well. Each employee needs to take bank robbery training every year. That's required. That's one of those things that we constantly put out there. But to keep bank security and fraud and external potential threats on the forefront of everybody's mind, we constantly send out alerts to our banking center managers, to our regional operations managers, to our team here at headquarters to say, okay, here's what we've got currently going on. We've got a group of individuals in this market that are opening up new account frauds, and this is their MO. Here's what you need to be looking for. Here's a group of known offenders. If you see these individuals, here's how you handle it. So training is part of it. Alerts is another good part of it. But know that in any sales environment, they are probably having sales calls, which gives you as a security director or as a department director an opportunity to spread your message even more. So if you've got something going on that's unique to a market, or maybe you're rolling out a new policy or procedure, take advantage of these sales calls that they're required to have weekly or sometimes even daily. Just get on that call. Hey guys, this is Jeremy Rowe. I want to remind you about the cash advance fraud group that's going around Southern California right now. Here's what we know. Here's what you can do to help. And here's who you report it to should you have any interaction with these folks. That puts that message out there. It puts your name out there. It keeps fraud on everyone's mind. And that's really going to help you, because what happens is you put out a message once a year, and 2 months down the road, maybe you've turned over so much that information is no longer valid, or people have just forgotten it because it was a year ago that they last heard from you. And that should never be the case.
Yeah, quite frankly, out of sight, out of mind. It's common. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't heard it, you forget about it, and there is no denying that fact. Jeremy, I have one final question for you. Actually, maybe not the final, but final real question. You started in this role experienced, but yet still lacking some experience. And I know there's other security managers out there in the same, doing the same thing. You're never quite ready for your leadership role because you've never had that baton handed to you before your first time. What are some resources you would recommend to other listeners who may be saying, man, I need to learn, I need to grow, I need to get better. Where do I go?
Sure. I would say you're probably starting, or you're coming from an organization where you at least played a role in a security or fraud environment. And so your existing or previous managers or supervisors are always a good resource. Your vendors, as you begin to contact vendors and work out a strategy for updating your equipment, or if you get into these conversations with vendors about maintenance agreements and you're setting up alarm contracts, CCTV contracts, whatever it may be, they're great resources for information, you included. I wish they had something 15 years ago like a podcast, that you're setting up right now. That would have been a great resource just on your way to or from work to hook up your phone and listen to a podcast and maybe get an idea or two from someone who's been in the field. But as you go into a new organization, take the time and meet the key players. Even if you don't report to that particular EMC member or to that board member, take the time, take them out to lunch, have a meeting, set up a conversation. And what you're going to find out is that from their perspective, fraud, security, investigations may be very important, and here's why it's important to them. And then you talk with somebody else who are just fraud is never something they think about. It's not important. They don't understand your role or what it is your team or you do. And so have those conversations with those folks. It's a chance to collect information about your particular organization. But as you learn, don't be too quick to make recommendations. As we discussed earlier, don't be quick to just say, hey, look, I don't think that's right. I think we should consider doing this. Before we say, hey, I think we should consider doing this, be diligent, do your research, find out why your argument for change makes sense and what impact that will have on your company's bottom line. And lastly, I would say, be humble. So when you go into any meeting, be it an interview with someone who's maybe stolen money from your bank, or a meeting with an executive, vice president of whatever, or if you're going out and meeting with a district attorney's office or a law enforcement officer, be humble. Know that all of those exchanges, all of those conversations, all of those are opportunities for growth, opportunities to learn, and it's hard to listen with your mouth open.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to thank you for the podcast plug. I do hope it's a resource to everyone out there and effectively helping everyone succeed. That's our tagline: security professionals helping other security professionals succeed. And I do hope that that's exactly what's happening. But finally, for the listeners that are interested in connecting with you, your message has resonated. Maybe they feel like they can learn from you. We all know our network is the most important aspect of what we do. Is there a way our listeners can reach out to you and connect with you?
Sure. Obviously, you can find me on LinkedIn, but you can also email me, and I'll get back with you one way or another, on or off the record. If there is, something that we've developed here that can help you, and maybe we need to redact that document a little bit, but I can still give it to you and give you a clear guideline or something to follow as a reference or resource or tool that you could apply somewhere else, I'm happy to share that information, because that is something that was very valuable to me when I got here, is understanding what my resources were at my previous organizations, and so you're not reinventing the wheel. So if you're new to this and you think that a problem is unique to your organization, there's a good chance that it's not, and that other organizations and other security professionals have already dealt with that issue, have already developed a policy and procedure or a response plan. And so reach out, someone you know, someone you trust, and I hope to be one of those folks. And let's see if we have a resource, or let's see if we can offer you some insight or some help, or even if it's a policy or procedure that we've written, like I said, that we can redact a little bit, and we can try to share that as a resource between each other.
Hey, Jeremy, I appreciate that. The reality is, you've heard me say this about Security Pro Insights. The goal is for it to become a virtual network, for us to be able to work with each other, learn from each other, and utilize each other to, again, succeed. I want to mention, if you reach out to Jeremy on LinkedIn, please reference Security Pro Insights podcast. That will allow him to understand why that connection is coming to him, and he'll gladly accept it. Jeremy, our time is up. I do appreciate all your insight, and look forward to maybe a future conversation with you on another episode. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, that wraps up another episode of Security Pro Insights. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen again today. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can contact me through the website, securityproinsights.com, using the contact page, or hit me up on LinkedIn. My profile will be on the show notes. You can find me under Scott Holman, your security rep. I look forward to hearing from you, hearing your thoughts about the show, and looking forward to always improving this show for your sake. Until then, happy day!